Greetings all, D&Disability. I got a special treat for you today as we continue our series with role players and attention hogs. But joining me in at least some of my other videos for the near if not indefinite future is a new friend to the channel. So, welcome Tunka.
I'm Tonka Neckbeard. I'm into only two things in life: my cups and my role playing games.
So, let's not beat around too much here. Let's delve into today's topic. When we jump into RPGs, you'd think role players would make up the vast majority of players, but I'm not really sure they do. Let me know what kind of player you consider yourself in the comments. But this group and their negative counterparts, the attention hogs, represent a logical progression through the game, at least at time. Join me as we drive through the positives, negatives, and what they mean for those with disabilities at your table. A role player, in my mind, is the one most interested in getting into character, acting out scenes, engaging with NPCs, and is looking for the most immersive experience. They make the DM's lives easy. They know who their character is, what they want, and how they think. They make decisions based on what their character would do, and not necessarily with metagame information. They're often the first to ask NPCs questions and bring humor to the gaming table. Those players often have predetermined goals for their characters. They want to kill the Lich, save their sick sister, marry a princess. Role players give the DM plenty to work with, help create game hooks, and are often the life of the table. These are also the kind of players that work best with spectator players. However, this isn't always the case.
Is this a difference between old and new school players? Talking about setting goals, because when I was a kid, a very, very long time ago, goals weren't baked into character creation, but were rather the byproduct of adventures we went on. Like if your character found a cool sword and shield that had slots for magic gems, that became the goal of your character.
I would say with newer generations, particularly 5th edition onwards, D&D and other similar RPGs have pushed more the narrative element as opposed to exploration and combat as narrative that we would see in, say, 1st and 2nd edition and even 3rd edition D&D. They have more background elements that kind of come from, say, Call of Cthulhu as an example, where we have these inborn hooks that pull us in. And those hooks, in some ways, are responsible for creating and really pushing this explosion of popularity that we see with roleplay heavy characters. I mean, just look at RPGs like Vampire the Masquerade, we see much the same thing. The major downside of role players, though, is that interactions with NPCs or even simple tasks like shopping can really drag ass. DMs that push the boundaries and want to roleplay out every incident and stretch the limits of player attention spans to the breaking point. Players in this group may take forever in combat or while exploring as they try to narrate every little thing they do. These same players might find combat and or the exploration elements of the game, i.e. the 3 pillars of play, boring. They may get their characters killed by making bad, quote-unquote, in-character decisions. By and large, there aren't too many downsides to this group, however, but they often fall victim to the killer of tables, destroyer of healthy groups, and beacon of frustration for everyone, that is to say, the attention hog.
Squeal like a pig, schoolboy. This is my story. You're just a sidekick.
And just because it's your story and everyone else are NPCs doesn't mean you have to be a dick. Unlike role players, attention hogs aren't always interested in just the roleplay element. Attention hogs seek to be in the center of any activity. If someone is doing something else, they must be there. If the party needs a spokesman, it must be them. If the village needs a hero, it will be that PC. They will outshine everyone else as they attempt to engage with all of the things. An attention hog DM, though, can be even worse. These DMs don't ever shut up, like me, treat the game as purely their story, like some others I know, and don't give the players any agency. And on top of that, they take an equally long time describing their epic enemies slaying the PCs.
Attention hogs are the bane of any table. So what can players and or DMs do when faced with this real-life monster?
Well, let's not put the cart before the horse. I'm getting there, I promise. Because for those of us who are neurodivergent, both archetypes can be a major issue. What some of us get caught up in is the crunchy math aspect. Others get stuck in the being the character aspect. Personally, I get easily trapped in the role player mindset, and I find it difficult to switch in and out of game modes. I want to be in one or the other. I don't want to flip back and forth. Some players with autism, in fact, may struggle when they are put on the spot and asked to RP in a given situation. So they might freeze if they are expected to actually, quote unquote, say what their character is saying. Others will engage with RPGs in this mode. And the reason why I mention this first is because when we think of the neurotypical solutions to solving these problems, which we'll get to later, we have to be aware that really some players, depending on the table, can't necessarily rip the reins out of the hands of the attention hog and gain control by themselves. We're going to have to work as a unit.
For those that may not know, what does neurodivergent mean? Also, what's a great way to ease players into role play that doesn't put them on the spot?
So the difference between neurodivergent and neurotypical, we could go into the medical definition here. I don't much see a point. Suffice to say that those who are neurodivergent think atypically for some reason, whether it's anxiety, depression, narcissism, even just simple autism or borderline autism, such as Asperger's, though they really consider it degrees of autism now, and they don't necessarily separate out Asperger's and autism. So, but you can talk to other professionals for that. Suffice to say that neurodivergent, effectively, is just someone who interprets things differently, and dyslexia, as an example, is neurodivergence. And speaking of, for those of us with ADHD, the attention hog and role player archetypes both are extreme results of those players trying to engage with the game. For both disabled and normies, hogging the spotlight can sometimes be accidental. They could simply be the optimized person or the default leader of the group, and thus feel obliged to engage with these elements, with whatever's going on. For me, I have to engage in the game somehow, or I simply check out. I stop paying attention. But the key, really, to stopping attention hogs is to not let this go too far. Then you get into the whole realm of the attention hog once you get carried away. I think the best way to stop this is to recognize the issue yourself and course correct accordingly.
Checking out is something even non-neurodivergent people do in the same situation. So, what's a great way to keep everyone invested in the game?
For someone with ADHD, autism, etc., they are more likely to simply not play the game anymore. They're more likely to simply, at least in my opinion, just walk away and put the game down and say, this isn't for me. So when I say that they're in danger of kind of checking out, I don't just mean for that one moment. I mean cashing their chips and walking away from the table permanently. In many instances, these kind of players and not giving your players an avenue into the game can force you to walk away from tables. I know I've done so plenty of times. But now to get back to your question, DMs and players do have some tools at their disposal. I told you I'd answer it. If a player is engaging in every impossible opportunity, this can be good, but acknowledge that player before simply turning to another silent player or simply another interested or player that you know has a character best statted for the situation, and simply ask them what they do. I do this to my kids in college, as an example, where if I see someone raising their hand and they've already spoken 3 times this class, I'll hold my hand out, point to them, and then look around the room for someone else. I'll even give them verbal cues like, I see you, and then I'll look around. It might seem awkward to have to remind players in a situation something like your character is talking to the Goblin King, and you can't, of course, be in both the entrance hall chatting with the guards and talking with the king. Or to simply just look at somebody and go, hey, you just listened at the door, the thief might want to try too, Mr. Ranger. However, sometimes those players need the reminder that there are others who want to act as well. As DMs and players, we need to remind role players and attention hogs that our polite silence should not be mistaken for apathy. If need be, ask players to raise their hand before speaking, like in class. It serves as a silent signal that is easy for others to interpret. If your DM is a heavy RPer, engage with them a little, and then you may want to just summarize what your characters say and hope they get the hint. And if that doesn't work, because maybe they're neurodivergent and they don't understand subtle hints, because trust me, this happens, and even if you think it's an obvious hint, try this next step. Simply ask them. Talk with them about it afterwards. Maybe ask them to shorten descriptions or simply explain that you can't focus if their villain takes more than a minute to monologue their evil plan for world domination. Or give the DM the option to monologue as long as they want, then simply raise your hand and go, hey, I'm sorry, can I get a quick synopsis here? I've had to do this many times, and as a DM, I will state that having to do this 4, 5, 6, 7 times during a session does get tedious, and it really drags me down, but I would rather do that than have my players not paying attention, not caring, or not being able to engage with the game. We are here to facilitate play.
So, in other words, Mr. Fancy Pants academic professor man, it's up to both the players and the DM to be able to, quote, read the table so that everyone can enjoy the fun of the hobby. As a wise person once said, it ain't no fun unless the homies can have some.
Right, and these aren't all the options at our disposal. But I, of course, don't want this video to drag on too long.
Don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button. Also, help me annoy that stupid kobold by ringing the bell.
And be that as it may, let me know what some of the ways you deal with players that take the role play element too far in your games. How do you divert or redirect attention hogs? I mean, torches and pitchforks work for me, but, at the end of the day, it's all about the role play and not the role play.